wanted to make a beginner-friendly video because a lot of the stuff that I post on the channel, varying degrees of octaves. For those of you who aren't familiar with what I do, technically I only just spoke about this recently, but there are multiple octaves. And each octave, if you think first octave is pure experience with no knowledge, which is what an infant is. A newborn baby is just pure experience. It doesn't have any knowledge of the world. So perception and thought have yet to solidify and combine. And then symbolic of the baby's first word, we have the second octave, which is the beginning of the second octave, which is where language begins to develop. So internal thinking starts to develop, language starts to develop, and we start putting thought, word to thing. Mum, dad, toy, you see? We start building and developing knowledge, right? Knowledge of particularly of the world. So what's happening is we're separating one holonymous experience into an individual self. This is really what the development is of a child. Then we have the third octave, and there's 7 levels in each octave, different levels, just like on a piano. Third octave is where we start developing identifications. We start identifying, this is my body, these are my toys, this is my thoughts, my feelings. Then we have the fourth octave, which is where we have a worldview. Worldview's crystallized. The intellect and reason start to develop now. So we start reasoning with things. Ooh, I shouldn't do that because this will hurt my hand. I shouldn't do this. Actually, that's more third octave, but what I'm saying is like maybe a little bit more intellectual reasoning, which is more like, I won't tell this to this person because if I do that, they will do this. And you'll be able to project stories is really what this is about. And the worldview is now crystallized. So you're now like an adult. So you're able to manipulate people, even if you do that subconsciously. You have religion exists in the fourth octave. You have spiritual practices. This is where you start to get spiritual. This is also where you start to suffer. So in the fourth octave, a lot of people start to suffer in there. It's where suffering is actually consciously realized. As a child, you don't really experience suffering like you do as an adult. So in the first few octaves, it's like, when a dog gets scared, it's not the same, it's not aware that it is scared. You see what I mean? It's scared, but it doesn't even know what that is. So fear and things like that, as a child, they're raw experiences. They can still be traumatizing, that's not to say the thing, but there's a different quality to it once we get to the fourth octave, which is what makes us seek spiritual practices and things, because we don't want to suffer. So when we're young, we suffer, then we're happy again. We suffer, we're happy again. It's a different quality. What happens in the fourth octave is start to lose that. So fourth octave is literally about developing the worldview. I have these beliefs. I have this worldview. This is my religion. This is my science. This is my whatever. And now I'll live and I'll find a job. And this is fourth octave. Then in fourth octave, about middle way through, we start suffering, or through intelligence, which wasn't my path, we suffer. And in suffering, this can happen from the ages about 16 up until about 30, depending on the development. Fourth octave starts and eventually leads to suffering. The suffering makes us want to remove the sufferings. We go, I don't like this, doesn't feel good, I want to live in a better way. What can I do to live in a better way? We start mindfulness, we start meditation, we start yoga, we start healthy things, right? We start developing a healthy lifestyle. This will further develop into a desire for enlightenment, basically. The end of the fourth octave is roughly where the octaves, they're not structures, that they can be bleeded. You can have fifth octave experiences in the fourth, but they're general living conditions, basically. So towards the end of the fourth octave is the desire for enlightenment. Once the desire for enlightenment happens, that's typically where the transition of the from the fourth to the fifth is, because that opens us up to spiritual experience. Once we're open to spiritual experience, we start devoting ourselves on a deeper level to spiritual practice. Spiritual practice typically leads to spiritual awakenings. So fifth octave is where we have our first glimpse of reality. Now, we're not going to go past the fifth octave. There's about 7 or 8. We could say 8 is the transcendent octave. 7 is the transition to the 8th, which is technically the first octave again. But we're not going to go past the 5th because I'm speaking to people right now, generally in the 4th and 5th octave. 5th octave is when we've had our first spiritual experience. And if you haven't had your first spiritual experience, you don't need to have spiritual experiences. It's just this typically happens in the 5th octave. My approach, everything I share, is about making this as easy as possible, making it as streamlined as possible to find unconditional happiness. Presenting it to you, as it was for me, the most efficient and most effective path to being unconditionally happy. So to lay the foundation, what helps aid in the process is understanding. You have to understand and have context to what happiness is. So if you're watching this now, you're probably transitioning from 4th to 5th octave, because no one would watch my channel in any octave below that. They'd watch it and they'd go off, they'd click off. Because energetically, it's not time for them to hear it. What I'm going to present to you right now is an understanding. The understanding is happiness is the nature of your mind. What does it mean for something to be the nature of something, right? Should be the first question. For something to be the nature of something, it means what does it do by nature of being itself? What is the natural expression of it just being what it is, right? So to put it into context, the nature of the sun. What is the nature of the sun? Well, if the essence of the sun is light, the nature of light is to shine. So by light existing, it naturally shines, you see? So the nature, so the essence of the mind is consciousness, and the nature of consciousness is happiness. So you could think pure consciousness shines with happiness. And what we find is that when we are a newborn infant, when we're in the 1st octave and the 2nd octave and the 3rd octave, we experience the nature of our mind all the time. We are pretty much happy, but we're not unconditionally happy because we haven't yet developed intellect. So basically, when we're young, the intellect is still developing. So at first, it's not even developing enough to have new conditioning, right? So it's developing enough that we're getting knowledge, but it's not developing enough it can question things. Then it's not but before it questions things, the intellect is so open, you will believe whatever you're told, basically, which means the intellect isn't developed. So the intellect is your capacity to see truth over fiction. You don't have that as a kid. Santa Claus is real. Yep, Santa Claus is real. Tooth Fairy is real. Yeah, it leaves money in my pillow. Yeah, of course it does. Yeah, perfect. Right? So because of that, it also means you're very happy because you don't have any conditioning. So happiness is the nature of consciousness. Consciousness is the nature of your mind, the essence of your mind. So what does it mean for consciousness to be the essence of your mind? It means that on a fundamental level, you, the one who's hearing my words right now, the one that observes your experience, is pure consciousness. That's it. That's what it means. It means the fact you can hear my words, the thing that's conscious of them, is you. And you are consciousness. You're not conscious. You're not a human being that has consciousness. You are consciousness experiencing a human being. Now, this is a deep place to go because this is 5th octave understanding. I'm giving you a general overview of happiness right now so you can understand. So if you want to go deeper, I have loads of videos on it so you can check that out. But what this means is that it's one of the most, by the way, fundamental questions. So there's 3 fundamental questions that you will learn in the 5th octave. What is the essence of yourself? Consciousness, but you need to see that and experience that, experientially and more often than just this video. What is the nature of yourself, which is what I'm sharing with you right now? And are you limited? In other words, are you limited to the body? Are you a consciousness in the body? Or is the body in consciousness? And is consciousness universal and shared? Is it like a shared network? Or is it a closed network? And each body is like a computer that has its own Wi-Fi in it, and it consciousness shines out and looks at things. This is the question that you will eventually, through the octaves, unravel. This aspect right now that we're looking at is what happiness is. Happiness is not a state of mind. So I had a conversation today, which is kind of what inspired me to make this video. And he said that, happiness seems to be what we're looking for, but it's not. It's love. And I thought, well, that's true, but given the definitions, it's not true. But I understand what he was saying, but he was using different words. Obviously, happiness to him was like a conditional state. And this is the thing. Most people believe happiness is a conditional state. But the reason we want anything ultimately isn't for happiness. It's to be the conventional happiness. It's to be divested of the resistance to experience. But this is the thing. Happiness is the experience of being divested of the resistance to experience. Because what that means is that there's no suffering. There's no sense of lack. There's no sense of abandonment. There's no loneliness. There's none of that. There's just peace. Inherent peace and full contentedness. And that full contentedness, it's not a feeling. And we've all experienced this. It's not a feeling, it's not a state, it's true happiness. It is literally consciousness shining into the world without anything preventing it from shining. In other words, without any conditions. So we've all experienced happiness, but our happiness is usually conditional, which means only when my conditions are met will I be happy, and only if my conditions stay the same will I be happy. So our peace is built on psychological sand. And when the tide comes and knocks the foundations down, our happiness is at stake. Now, our happiness isn't actually at stake. We give permission for things to disturb our peace based on the conditions that we set. Now, the liberating thing to see here is that we set the conditions based on what we believe to be true. So the process is to develop the intellect. The intellect is what is telling you this condition is a worthy condition on your happiness, this condition isn't a worthy condition, and this is what is building the house on sand. Now, we don't want to build a house of happiness. No one wants to be living in a world where I have to control every single possible thing I can so that I can then be happy or maintain my happiness. It's just not a nice way to live. So what I share is basically, how do we be unconditionally happy? How do we be happy regardless of our conditions, right? Regardless of anything in experience? Well, it's very simple. You just recognize the essence of yourself, then you recognize the nature of yourself. And once you see those two things, you realize happiness really is unconditional. It's actually always shining. The only thing that blocks it are the conditions I have made. So what we see is happiness isn't a state of mind, and this is the first thing to understand. Because one of the biggest conditions is that my happiness is only when I feel good. And this is what makes people think happiness is a feeling. If you chase feelings, you'll be chasing them forever, right? Because feelings come and feelings go. Feelings are states. So happiness is not a state. You can be at peace when you're in complete neutrality. If happiness and peace are, by the way, the same thing in my definition, you can be in complete neutrality, no excitation, which means no feeling in the body, and you can be happy and at peace. And in fact, that is true peace. So what happens is we can have excitations, we can be sad, we can be angry, we can grieve, we can be frustrated, and we can still be at peace. Most people do not know that that's possible because their anger is resisted. And when you resist anger, it creates blame, shame, guilt, and hatred. And blame, shame, guilt, and hatred, they are flavors of suffering. They are flavors of resistance. Now, this is the next thing for you to understand that's fundamental. All suffering is literally the resistance to what is. So basically the resistance to an internal state. Because what happens is you'll resist something on the outside, which creates a resistance to an internal state, and you resist that. And the resistance is your lack of ability to completely surrender to the fact something is. Now, most people think, no, I don't want to surrender to the fact that some things are because I don't accept them, because I don't like abuse, I don't like this thing, It's like, here's the thing that we need to understand. The next level of this is that what I'm saying doesn't mean you let injustice take place. It means you do not fundamentally reject the fact that it takes place. Because what happens is all injustices take place because of resistance. Just somebody else's. So just because your resistance seems to be more noble than the one causing harm to people, it doesn't mean that your resistances don't cause harm to people or to yourself. They do, just in maybe more socially acceptable ways. So just because your resistance is more socially acceptable than somebody else's resistance that makes them, murder people or abuse people, it doesn't mean that you are perfect. It doesn't mean that your resistance is that your suffering creates suffering too. It does. All suffering perpetuates suffering. There's something we have to come to terms with, which means when we see the world and we don't like the way it is, we don't have to like it, so long as we're not resisting it. Because when you see something you don't like and you are dependent on liking the world to be the way you want it to be for your happiness, you will resist it and you will seek to change it to change your suffering, which means your happiness is actually predicated on the suffering to take place so that you can relieve it, so that you can be happy. So do you see how the chain of suffering cycles? Everyone wants to remove suffering. And suffering is the desire to remove itself. So this is something significant to see. We like to find happiness in purpose. We like to find happiness in trying to remove the suffering of the world. This is a big realization to come to. If you depend on happiness, on the purpose or saving people or helping people in order to fulfill yourself, then what you're doing is again cycling through the suffering. You are seeing there is suffering. I can find purpose in helping people stop suffering. To varying degrees, you could be whatever. So I will find purpose in helping people stop suffering. That's a good job, right? I can do that. And then what happens is you need the suffering to take place in order for you to not be suffering. Do you see how crazy that is? It's not crazy, and I understand it. This is obviously something I felt and had to come to terms with at some point. So you can't help people to remove suffering because suffering can't be removed, because suffering is the desire to remove suffering. That's literally the essence of it. Which means then what can you do? On a personal level, what you can do is recognize what you are. Pure consciousness doesn't resist anything. So it's like empty space. It does not let anything stop. It's just pure peace itself. Now, what happens is when you see that very clearly, it starts to bleed off into your life because you start to recognize, I am this absolute pure aliveness that doesn't actually resist anything. On a human level, I cannot like this, that, whatever. If someone's being bullied, I can stop them being bullied if I want to. But I do it out of peace. I do it out of genuine peace. And this is exactly what will happen. You start saying, ooh, I don't need to do this to end my suffering. I can do this out of love and not out of hatred. So what happens is we start to do something called, what they basically call Indian traditions, right action, or in the Buddhist traditions, right action. It just means action done out of love. You don't have to like it, but you still do it because it's out of love. It's a very new way of living in the world. So happiness is unconditional. It's the nature of your mind. And what I explore here is all the questions that you may have that might not believe what I'm saying. So it's basically like, I'm saying this is how I live. This is how thousands of years of traditions have also lived. So it's not just some insane idea that I've made up. And I am here with an open invitation, if it interests you enough, to answer any questions that may contradict. So I'm not here saying you just believe what I say. I'm actually saying come up with the best arguments to disprove what I'm saying. Obviously, not just to argue about being right, because that's just like, I don't care for that stuff. But what I would love is for people to be super, super skeptical, but interested at the same time. So like, almost like playing devil's advocate, because in order for you to fully see the truth in what I'm saying, you have to play the skeptic in a way. You can't just be like, yep, well, he says it, I'm going to trust it. I know none of you are going to be thinking that anyway. But really go deep on the questions, right? Because what that's going to do is refine your intellect. You have to know there's no stone you haven't unturned. This is what it was like for me, right? I had to search for every possible question I could ask my teacher to make sure there was no stone I left unturned. Because I could be wrong, he could be wrong, this could all be a mistake, I could be insane, right? So we play the skeptic, but we play it with openness, with vulnerability, with curiosity, with joy. Like, this is fun. Well, the way I've been living anyway sucked because it caused suffering. If someone's telling me there's a way to live and you don't suffer, well, I may as well take it on board because everything I've previously done has not done what I would have liked it to have done, right? So treat this as a hobby, a fun project. Be interested, be playful. It can bleed into your life with many other different varying, things that you like to listen to, whether you follow any religions and things like that. It really is just a fun adventure to take on board. I don't expect anyone to believe what I say. I expect people to experience what I say. And everything that I say, I want to help you see that within your own experience, which is hard to do on a video without being in conversation. When you experience the sound of the birds or the sound of my voice, there's something that hears that. And the one that hears it isn't the ears. And the one that hears it isn't the brain, because the brain isn't actually something that can hear things, right? The brain is quite literally just a bundle of atoms and molecules. The one that hears it is you, and that's your being. That's what being is. So the one that's alive, if you look at a bulb, a light bulb, when the light is on, it's not the bulb that is the light. The bulb is the body for the light to express. Now, in the same way, your being, consciousness, it's not created by the body in the same way that the light bulb doesn't create light. The light is already present, already created, already is. And the light bulb, you could say, localizes the energy into what we call light. Well, our mind is like, our body mind is like the light bulb. And your being isn't limited to the body mind. The body mind are like a light bulb is to the energy or the electricity that creates light. The energy is consciousness in this analogy. So energy channels into a light bulb and shines light. Consciousness, you could say, crystallizes or channels into a body mind and expresses life. Life is the light in this analogy, the thing that's expressed. Now, you don't need to know those logistics just yet. The most important thing to recognize is your being, which is the fact of your own existence. Right now you experience being aware, and being aware is an experience. Because you know you are aware. And you can only know if you're aware if you have the experience of awareness. Because if you don't know you're aware, well, you wouldn't have the experience of awareness. You wouldn't even know that. But the fact that you do is a signal to you that you do experience awareness. Now the question is, where is that awareness? That's another level. Questions that we explore. But the primary thing that we focus on right now is just recognizing the fact that you exist. And the significance of that. We all know that we exist, but the problem is, what is it that exists? Where's the existence-ness coming from? Where's the aliveness coming from? It's not coming from a thought. It's not coming from a sensation. It's not coming from a sound. It's not coming from your head. It's not coming from your heart. Your head and your heart, they're just objects within the world. Where's the aliveness coming from, though? That's coming from your being. That's coming from consciousness. When you experience being aware of being aware, which is fourth and fifth, and will take you to the sixth. You could say like a very beneficial understanding in those octaves. You realize your being is just a sheer fact that you're alive. That aliveness that you feel right now, that you don't feel it, I'm being poetic here, that aliveness that you know is your being. And now all the meditation practices, if you've ever done meditation or heard about meditation, they're all there to help you recognize that sense of being over a long period of time. So it's kind of like the more you swim in it, the more obvious it becomes. So your being is always present, this natural piece of being alive. Not the thing that we think is alive, the body and the mind, those are objects. Notice this awareness is not an object. It's not something you can touch. You see, you can't touch it, taste it, feel it, hear it, but it's present, it's there. So when you hear maybe Eckhart Tolle or any other spiritual teachers talk about being present, that's what they're basically saying is be with your being. Be being. Being is just presence. Pure presence without an object. This is the heart and essence of meditation, basically. All meditation practices take you to where I'm pointing you right now. So you can either do meditation practices or you can do things like this, which is a process of understanding. I call this thought yoga. It's where you point towards the thing, or one form of thought yoga is where you point towards the one pointing. You point towards the one experiencing. So all your life, you've been experiencing something, right? You were 2 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, 200 years old. Obviously not, but... And you've been experiencing a continuity the whole time. Well, the one that's been not aging while the body has been aging is your being, and it's the one hearing these words right now. That which has been constantly observing experience the entire time. Now, when you recognize that, eventually you will find unconditional happiness purely because it doesn't have any limitation. So you will create conditions based on the limitations of what you believe you are. So if what you believe you are is limited, then you will experience the consequences of those beliefs. When you see that what you are isn't limited, doesn't have a size, form, shape, dimension, eventually unconditional happiness, along with a couple of other things that you'll realize along the way, will be the nature of your experience. It'll be your day-to-day experience. So you might get sad, you might feel low energy, you might get frustrated, but you won't suffer those things anymore. And this is the beauty of this path. It's very simple. The only time it gets complicated is with the complexities of your mind. So depending on the complexities of your mind, depends on the level of complexity that you will experience when going through this path. I have a free community. In that community, I do calls on Thursdays for free. So you can come and chat to me. You can try and find arguments against what I'm saying, and I can present to you the counter arguments to clarify what I'm saying. And this is the point. This is these types of conversations that we should be having. That's the purpose of this. So open invite to explore. Don't have to, but it would be fun if you do. Have an amazing day, guys. Thank you for listening.